Oh, wow. Wow. We're starting a brand new series today called Your Life Matters, and somehow in the crowd today, if you got in, you didn't get a Sunday experience guide. If you raise your hand, the ushers would be happy to give you one because we want to be sure that you can take notes. This is a really, really, really good series. We've been working and planning on this for quite a while, and I think it'll be very beneficial for you. So if you didn't get a Sunday experience guide, just raise your hand. And I'd also like for you to turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Isaiah 49, verse 1. I'll be there in just a minute. A truck driver was hauling a load of 500 penguins, and his truck broke down. So he flagged down another truck and a driver, and he said, I've got to get these penguins to the zoo. I'll give you $500 if you'll drive these penguins to the next and take them to the zoo in the next town. So the guy said, yeah, exchange the penguins, exchange the money, and the guy began driving. And a day later, the first driver got his truck fixed, and he drove in the next town, and he saw to his amazement, the second driver was walking across the street with 500 penguins in single file waddling behind him from one side to the other. And the guy was furious, and he ran up to him and he said, I thought I gave you $500 to take those penguins to the zoo. And the guy said, I did take them to the zoo, but I had enough money left over to take them to the movies. I don't think he understood clearly what he was supposed to do, right? And I wonder sometimes in our life, are we a little fuzzy in our sense of purpose of what God wants to do in our life? A lot of times we look at successful people and we think, oh man, they've got it made. They make money, they've got it, they're famous, they've got all of those things. But you'd love to trade places with them and say, well, I'd like to live the life they have. But you know what? The longer I live, the more I realize that it doesn't matter how much money you have or what prestige you have, that there are a lot of people that feel like their life is very insignificant. You say, wow, you have every reason to be proud and successful. And they just look at you and say, it just feels like my life is rather insignificant. I feel like I'm on a journey of doing the same thing every day. And it's just like a perpetual thing. It's like Groundhog Day. It's the same thing every day. I get up, have a little breakfast, get ready, go to work. I come home, we have dinner, help the kids with their homework, watch a little TV, get them in bed. The next morning, get up, have a little breakfast, go to work. And I live this constant perpetual thing until I can live for the weekend. Because in the weekend, I can break the boredom that I have of going through the week. That's a picture of a lot of people who are fuzzy about the purpose that God has for their life. And in this series, my heart's desire is to help you to understand that God purposed your life to make a difference because your life matters. Would you look at your neighbor and tell them your life matters? And would you look at the other one that you weren't sure if their life matters and just encourage them too and tell them, your life really matters. It really matters. It really matters. Your life matters. Say this with me, my life matters. Now for some of you, that's really hard for you to say because you really, really, really don't believe that. You've been filled with so many negative words. Some of you were grown up in a household where people said to you, you'll never amount to anything, you'll never make it. You've had people tell you in school that you'll never do that. You've had people say to you who've left you and maybe walked away from you and deserted you. They've said negative words. And some of you today, you're captivated by your past. You made a mistake in your life. You made a big mistake. Let's face it, it was a big mistake. And you live with haunting memories of, because I made that mistake, my life will never turn around. But how many of you know that God specializes in recycling violence and brokenness in our life? Would you give him a hand if he's done that in your life? God made you in his image. Before you were ever formed, before you were ever thought, God knew you would be. Before you ever drew your first breath, God knew your life and what he wanted you to accomplish. You're not an accident. Isaiah 49:1. It's up on the screen. I'd like for you to read this with me. Isaiah 49:1. Listen to me, all you distant lands. Pay attention, you who are far away. The Lord called me before my birth. From within the womb, he called me by name. Would you look at that again? Look at that. The Lord called me before my birth. While I was still in my mother's womb, he called me by name. I don't care what's been dealt to you. You have a purpose. Your life matters. And you may have never begun to live a life that matters. But I'm praying in this series you understand that. You see, you got to begin to see yourself different and say different things about yourself. Let's sort of change that verse around and let's make it a confession. And we'll say it like this. Let's say this together. Are you ready? Before I was born, the Lord called me by name, and he gave me a purpose to complete. My life matters. God formed me with his own hand. He loves me, and God doesn't make mistakes. Yeah, I think some of you didn't really believe that. I think some of you didn't believe that. Let's read it again, maybe with a little more gusto. Just beat up on the devil a little bit. He's been telling you for a long time that your life doesn't matter. He's been telling you for a long time that it wasn't God that formed you. You've made such a mess of it. No, let's just put him in his place. Let's say what God says about us. Let's read it again. Before I was born, the Lord called me by name and gave me... So as we move into this teaching, I want to give you just a couple of things, I call them pre-sermon thoughts, to sort of help us to understand that your life matters. And here's the first one. It's a fill-in there in your notes if you're taking notes. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to others, because as soon as we start talking about your life matters, you think, my life matters? Man, I work over here on the road. I work over here in the dirt. You know, I just take care of my kids, and I do that. How come look, when I see people around me, I see, man, their life matters. But you see, you've got to see yourself as God created you to be. You can only compare yourself with yourself and the potential that you have. I'm not trying to be the world's greatest pastor. I'm trying to be the greatest pastor I can be with my talents, with my abilities, and where he sent me. He doesn't judge me by another pastor. He judges me by what he put in me and what am I doing with that. So my question to you today is, are you using what God gave you? Stop trying to compare yourself to others. Second of all, when we talk about your life matters, you got to develop your potential instead of complaining about your limitations. Develop your potential instead of complaining about your limitations. Well, I'm this, or I'm that, or I'm something else. No, there's one thing I know about your life. You have some strengths that nobody else has. You need to begin focusing on the strengths, and you manage the weaknesses. You surround yourself with people to help you with the weaknesses, right? You manage your strengths. That's when people, when their life matters, they learn to realize, you know what? I'm not good at everything, but I am some things that I'm good at, and so I'm going to focus on those and work on those, and I'll manage my weakness, and I'll quit complaining about my limitations. And number 3, expect criticism. If you take this sermon series seriously, and if you start saying, I want my life to matter, if you start saying, Lord, show me my purpose and my destiny, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get some criticism by people who are not willing to change. They'll say things like this to you. Well, you don't hang out with us anymore. You don't get smashed with us on the weekend like you used to. What's wrong? Do you think you're too good for us? Do you think you found a better way? Yeah, I think I found a little better way. I finally woke up to realize God created me for more than just living on the weekend. God created me to live for a purpose, and my life matters, and it affects other people. You see, it's like your life matters to your family, the people that are around you, and you've got to understand that. And here's the last one there. You got to start where you are now. Start where you are now. When we read about the great heroes of the faith, We read about Abraham, we read about Elijah, we read about, Rahab, she was listed in the Hall of Faith, and we read those, and we say, yeah, this is what they accomplished. But you got to rewind that tape, and you got to go with where they started. Because sometimes when they started, they said, like Gideon, me? Me? You think you want to use me? So you gotta start where you are today and not where you wish you were. So in this series, we're going to examine some Old Testament heroes of faith, and then we're going to learn some significant principles of how that they learned to live their life so that it would matter. So today I want to start off with Abraham. Abraham is called the father of the faithful. He's called a friend of God. In fact, the nation of Israel and the fulfillment of God's redeeming plan for mankind can all be circled around Abraham and his faithfulness to God. In Genesis chapter 22, there's a verse there in your notes, Genesis 22 and verse 5. I'm gonna sort of be at the end with Abraham, and then today I'm going to rewind and we'll walk along the journey that he made it. But as he's walking with God, God says to him, as one of the final acts of his stepping with God, God says to him, the scripture's on the note on the screen up there, and he said, I want you to go to Mount Moriah, and I want you to sacrifice your son Isaac. Now, that doesn't make sense. Isaac is his only son. Isaac is about 20 years old at this time. He's not a kid. And God says, I want you to sacrifice your son to me. That doesn't make sense. But here's what Abraham does, even when it doesn't make sense, because he's already begun this journey of walking with God, that he's walking by faith. And the scripture says in Genesis 22 and verse 5 on the screen, and Abraham said to this young man who was with him, the servant guy that came with him, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder. Would you underline that phrase, go yonder? The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. Circle that phrase, come back to you. We will come back to you. Everything you go through is taking you to a place that I call yonder. Some of you remember that song, and it came to your mind already, going up yonder, right? So that'll probably be in your mind the rest of the day. But what are you talking about yonder, Terry, when you say everybody has a yonder? Well, here's what I mean. Yonder is a place where you discover that your life matters. Yonder, on Mount Moriah, Abraham discovered that his life matters, and that what he enacted on that miracle, on that mountain, was the same thing that happened with Jesus. 3 days up, the wood placed on his back, all the things, and God redeemed that. So he realizes that his life matters. So when you get to a place called yonder, you discover your life matters. You discover it's a place of destiny and purpose. You get to that place of yonder and you say, oh yeah, I have a purpose, I have a destiny. And a yonder is a place that you discover what you were created to do. What you were created to do. Now, when I talk today about yonder, and I talk about purpose, it doesn't necessarily mean that the thing that you do for a living is going to change. You see, there's a difference in what we do that make a living, that puts a paycheck in our account, and what we do for God. They can be the same thing, or they can be different. But what I'm talking today is not about what puts the money in your bank, but I'm talking about what puts the life in your heart. What puts that purpose in there and say, hey, I was made for this. I was made for this. And if you've never discovered that, I pray that in this series, these next 5 or 6 weeks, you'll hang in there with me, because some of you won't get there immediately, but it'll be a journey. It'll be a step. You see, when we talk about yonder, it's a place that where we go farther than we typically would go when we do more for God. It's a place that's higher than we usually climb, and it'll cost you more than we're usually willing to pay. But if we can get there, we have the rewards and the promises of God, and we understand that our life really matters. Everyone has a yonder. Everyone. So how do we get there? How do I get to that place that I discover my purpose, that my life matters? Well, we're going to study Abraham's life and pull out some points that'll help us on the journey. So here's the first one. Fill this in your notes. You got to dare to believe that your life matters. Would you fill that in your notes? Number one, dare to believe that your life matters. God preempted our destiny. And he wants us to know his will for our life. He has a pre-arranged destiny for you. We look at Abraham and we say, why did God choose Abraham? Because God is sovereign. Not because Abraham was anything great. In fact, we'll look in a few minutes. He lived in a house full of idol worship, and his dad was an idol maker. So it wasn't that, but there was just something. God looked down, and before Abraham was ever born, God put his hand on him, and he said he's going to be the father of faith. He's going to be the one that I'm going to demonstrate faith through. He's going to be the one. Just like you. You're sitting here and thinking, well, no. God's already put his hand on you. He's got a purpose for your life. There was a guy that was living with excruciating pain, and he went to the doctor. And he said, doctor, I just hurt all over. He said, well, what seems to be the matter? He said, wherever I touch on my body. He said, I'm excruciating pain. The doctor said, well, touch your forehead. Oh, just so much pain. Well, touch your knee. Oh, touch his knee, pain. He said, well, touch your cheek. Oh, touch your other hand. Oh. So the doctor did an intensive study. He said, oh, I've discovered the problem. You have a dislocated finger. And wherever you touch, it causes pain because you have a dislocated finger. We laugh at that and we say, oh, the ridiculousness of that man. Really? Some of you feel like every area of your life is out of balance. Everywhere you look, there's pain. Everywhere you look, it just seems like nothing is right. And I'm going to submit to you today, it may be because you've never understood the one thing that really matters. The one thing that really matters is that you discover the purpose that God has pre-planned for you to live out. And God starts where you are. And he starts with what I call a spirit of discontentment. And some of you felt that today. In fact, some of you, it's already come to you as I'm teaching. You've had that thought, you know what? I'm really not contented with my life right now. I think there should be more than what I'm going through. I've got a good job. I've got a good family. I've got this and I've got that. But there just seems to be something missing in my life. God often starts with a spirit of discontentment. Why? Because he wants to move you on a journey to a place called Yonder. But he can't get you there as long as you're just happy and contented with where you are. It doesn't matter if you've even discovered your purpose. The more you discover your purpose, the more you're discontent that you want more of God and more of God and more of his presence and more of his power. So you look at Abraham. He was raised in a family in which his dad built idols. He carved idols. He sold idols. And I wonder if as a kid growing up and as a young man growing up that Abraham might have looked at those idols. They had eyes, but they couldn't see. They had ears, but they couldn't hear. They had mouths, but they couldn't speak. And I wonder if maybe sometime in life he began to feel a little discontentment. Religion's got to be more than just something dead. Religion's got to be more than just going through the actions. There's got to be more to that, and it's that spirit of discontentment. So I'm praying today for the purpose that God has for you, that you get discontented where you are and say, no matter what it costs me, no matter what I do, I want to live out the destiny that he has for me. And in Acts chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, Stephen is talking about Abraham, the father of faith. And he says, brothers and fathers, listen to me. Our glorious God appeared to our ancestor Abraham in Mesopotamia before he settled in Haran. In other words, he moves from modern-day Iraq to modern-day Syria. And God told him, leave your native land and your relatives and come into a land that I will show you. So here's Abraham. Now, you got to realize he's 75 years old at this time. He's not a kid. He's 75. He's lived in this place for a long time. In fact, Ur of the Chaldeans, in this area of Mesopotamia, was a city of 300,000 people. 300,000. That's a pretty large city. History tells us it was full of the arts. It was full of education, great accomplishments, and it was a comfortable place to be. And God comes to him and he says to him, Abraham, I want you to leave the country where you are. And I want you to go to a place that I'll show you. Well, where is it? Well, I'll show you when you get there. Now, does that make sense? Just like today you say, if I could just get a picture of my destiny, if I could just get a picture of my purpose. Well, first of all, you've got to be willing to start the journey. You got to believe that your life matters. And so what did he do? He simply stepped out in faith to be obedient to God. He went not by what he saw, but what he heard. See, some of you, God has spoken some great promises to you, but you haven't seen it happen yet. But you're walking not by what you see, but you're walking by what God's said to you. See, God may be saying to you that, hey, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do with your life. And it makes absolutely no sense because God is asking you to move from the comfort to a level of discomfort, from the known to the unknown, from the certainty to the uncertainty. But the question is, are you willing to risk it all to get to that place where you know that your life matters? Are you willing to give up whatever you have to give up to get to that place to say, I'm exactly in the center of what God wants to do with my life? Second of all, we have to maintain a constant connection with God. Maintain a constant connection with God. So Abraham, he left the familiarity. He moved into the land of Canaan. And when he got to the land of Canaan, one of the first things he did is he began building an altar. He built an altar to remind himself that it was God who sent him and that he needed God's presence. In fact, over 7 times in just a few verses, it says, and he built the altar. In fact, look at this, Genesis 12:8. After that, Abram traveled south, set up camp in the hill country with Bethel to the west, Ai to the east, and there he built another altar and dedicated it to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord. So here's what he's saying. I realized to fulfill my purpose, okay, I've stepped out, but that doesn't mean it's the end of it. I've taken a faith step, but that's not the end. But to keep me reminded of how I'm going to get to a place called Yonder, I've got to keep talking to God, keep putting these altars in to remind me I am where I am because of God. I'm going where he wants me to go because of God. See, tonight is a great night in the growth track. It's step 3, which is discovering your purpose. Discovering your purpose. And if you haven't been to growth track, I'd really encourage you tonight to come at 5 o'clock. It's just down the hall right here in the dream team room. But what happens a lot of times, people say, yeah, I want to find my calling. I want to go find my God calling. I want to find my purpose. And so people spend all of their life. Now here, listen to me. People spend all of their life trying to find their purpose. But before you find your purpose, you've got to find the presence of God in your life. It's not going calling seeking, but it's going God seeking. Because you see, if I draw close to God, then he's going to reveal to me my calling. That's why some of you are so frustrated right now of what God wants to do in your life. You've taken tests and you've gone through all of those things and you're working hard to saying, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? And all the time God's saying, well, why don't you meet me over here at the altar? Why don't you meet me over here at a place called relationship where I can speak into you, where I can speak into you. Here's the third thing. We have to trust God's timing. Number 1, dare to believe your life matters. Number 2, maintain a constant connection with God. And number 3, trust in God's timing. God says to Abraham, I'm going to bless you with a son through your wife Sarah. And through that son, and through all of the heirs of that one son, the world is going to be blessed. Oh, that sounds sweet, doesn't it? But think about this. When God gave that promise, Abraham was almost 100, and his wife was 99. Abraham, I'm going to give you a son. This is pre-blue pill. I mean, there's some things that logically won't work, right? There's some things that if you just look at it at face value, it's not right, it won't work, it can't happen. But you see, we serve a God that can do whatever he chooses to do if we're willing to allow him to work in our life. So Abraham, here he is. And God says, I'm going to give you a son. What he's hearing does not line up with what he looks at when he looks in the mirror. What he's hearing doesn't line up with what he looks at when he sees his sweet wife, Sarah. What about you? What is it that God is speaking to you? And really, it doesn't line up with what you're seeing. It doesn't even make sense in your mind. Some of you, some of you, God has given you a great promise, a seed, and you haven't seen the fulfillment of that. And some of you are sitting here today and you're saying, you know what, I must be right, like really at the bottom of the list. Because I hear all these people saying, God gave me a promise and then he fulfilled it. God gave me a promise and he fulfilled it. I'm going to tell you, there's some promises God has given me, and I haven't seen the fulfillment of those yet. Anybody else like that in here? Would you raise your hand? Say, God's given me some promises, and I haven't seen the fulfillment of that. I don't even know how it's going to happen. But I'm going, not by what I see, not what my brain tells me, but I'm going what he's saying in my heart. He's saying to me, this is a promise that I'm going to give you. I'm often reminded, no matter how many doomsday people talk about the destruction of the earth, I'm reminded of Genesis chapter 8 and 22, that God said, while the earth remains, there's going to be seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. There's going to be seed time. Now, I want you to think about that. Think about it like this. Some of us have never really looked at that word. First of all, you have seed, right? S-E-E-D, a promise. God has given a promise. He's dropped a seed thought in you. Maybe it's to start a business. Maybe it's to do something different with your life. Maybe it's a call into full-time Christian ministry. Maybe it's to be a missionary somewhere. And he dropped that seed into your heart. Now, when you plant a seed, you're looking for what? A harvest, right? You plant a seed and you're looking for the harvest. God's planted some seeds in my life, and I'm looking for the harvest. I'm believing for the harvest. But I know the seed is there. I know the promise is there, but I haven't seen the harvest of that yet. I'm talking to somebody today that years ago, God laid his hand on you and he called you to do something specific. I'm starting to call out ministry, full-time ministry into people. Some of you, God called you into full-time ministry years ago, and it doesn't make sense. And it seems like you've blown it all. But it was a seed, but there's going to be a harvest of that. But I don't like the word in between. Here's the word in between. Time. Seed, harvest. But then there's this thing called time. Time. Oh God, you must be making a mistake. Look at my age. Maybe, Lord, there's no way. But look at Genesis 18 and 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Anything too hard for the Lord? I'll return this same time next year, and Sarah will have a son. In life, some of you are waiting for some things to come to pass. You're waiting for that job. You're waiting for that purpose. You're waiting for that person to come into your life. And I'm going to encourage you, cooperate with God's timing. Number 4, here it is. Recognize your inadequacy and his sufficiency. Recognize your inadequacy and his sufficiency. If you want to write it over to the side, just say, stay out of your own way. Stay out of your own way. Between Genesis chapter 16 and chapter 17, there's 13 years of silence in which God doesn't say anything else. He doesn't give any more promises. You remember the story. I don't have time to go into it long. But you know, Abraham and Sarah, God has given us a word that you're going to have a son. That son, you're going to bless all the nations. And so Abraham and Sarah began to take matters in their own hands. They realized that in ourselves, we are inadequate to make this miracle happen. There's no way that we can do this. And so what they began doing, she comes up with this idea, and he didn't discourage it in the least little bit. She said, I'll give you my handmaiden. You can go in, have sex with her, and she'll give you a son, and then you can work through those things. That wasn't what God said. God said it'll be through Sarah. How many times in our life have we taken a promise that God said something that he's going to do, but then we're not willing to wait? We're not willing to trust in his sufficiency. But we say things like this, well, I'm going to make it happen. I'll make this happen. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to make this happen. This is what the Lord promised, and I'm going to do it. Yeah, it may be what he promised, and in his timing, he's going to bring it forth. But if you continue to try to do it in your own strength, then you got to prop that sucker up for the rest of your life. We have to recognize I'm inadequate to do everything, but I believe God can make it happen. He said in Genesis 17:1, when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I'm El Shaddai. Would you say El Shaddai with me? There you know a little Hebrew for today. That just means God Almighty. Say it, God Almighty. God Almighty. God says, let me introduce yourself to me. I'm not asking you to do this in yourself. If you could do this in yourself, it would be something. You see, when God gives us a dream of something, it's always so big, there's no way that I can make it happen by myself. And he says, let me introduce myself to you. I'm El Shaddai. I'm the God of more than enough. I am the God who's able to make this thing happen. Here's what he's saying. I'll work a miracle. I can even reverse time if I have to reverse time. Don't rely on your ability and your skills. Boy, I'm smart enough to realize the blessings of this church is not because of my skills and my abilities, but because I and our prayer team spends time seeking out God and saying, God, it's all about you. Boy, it's not of my giftings. It's all about God. And what God wants to do in your life is not about your feeling you can make it happen. But let that inadequacy come and say, Lord, if you don't do it, it'll never happen. It can't work. Number 5, we have to remember that God always does the right thing even when we don't understand. God always does the right thing even when we don't understand. If you forget everything else I say in this teaching, I want you to remember what I'm getting ready to say right now. To discover your purpose, to discover your place of yonder that God has for you, to discover your destiny, it often hinges and balances on a single decision. Am I willing to trust God to go up yonder, or am I going to continue to try to make it happen by myself? See, some of you have been driving your own life. You can say the words, you can actually go through the actions, but your heart's not surrendered to God. And the harder you try to drive, the more frustrated you get. You have to get to that place where you just simply say, Lord, I'm going to give up to you. I've been driving long enough. I mean, look at your life right now. Look at your life. Let me play a Dr. Phil with you. How's that working for you? Genesis 22:5. And Abraham said to this young man, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder, and we will come back to you. That doesn't make sense. Abraham, I'm going to give you a son. And now the son's Isaac is almost 20 years old. Some of you thinking he's a kid. No, he's 20 years old. And Abraham is 120. 20-year-old, bulging biceps, 120-year-old, probably a little crotchety. At any time in life, Isaac could have said, no, this is not going to happen. But because, hear this, parents, hear this. But because Abraham had been consistent on his journey with God, not perfect, but consistent, he kept coming back to God. When he got to that place where it was going to take his own son, even his own son says, I not only trust you, I trust God, and no matter what goes on, I'll be there for you. But what about you, parent? Have you been so inconsistent that your kid doesn't even know which way you're going? I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. I want my life to matter. Abraham starts up this Mount Moriah. The boys carrying the wood. They don't converse. They get to the top. Where's the sacrifice, Dad? Oh, the Lord will provide. Hey, okay, he will? Yeah, he will. Okay, son, I'm going to ask you to do something really hard. You see, we just read this, but we don't read the feelings, and we don't read the reality into it. Isaac is Abraham's promise. He loves him probably more than anything else in the world because that's what God promised him. And God is simply saying, I want to see if you're willing to let go of what you value the most. If you see, for some of you business people, to get to the next level, you've got to let go of some of the security that you have right now and be able to trust God to the promise that He's put into your heart. You got to be willing to expand. I heard one of our business leaders last night say, yeah, it's a little tough right now, but he said, I'm feeling like God is leading me into this other destiny. And I was blessed last night when I heard Vance say, yeah, a little tough right now, but I'm hearing God say, we need to expand and go in a different direction. And I'm saying, yeah, God, that's how you do it, right? You can't see it. It doesn't make sense. There's no way, but you hear in this little voice, hey, I want to show you something. I want to show you something maybe that can make a difference not only in your life but other people's lives. Lay down, son. Me? Yeah. Yeah, lay down. And he tied him down. And he reached for his knife. When I get to heaven, I'd like to check this video out and see it. Because I don't think Abraham pulled his knife out and said, getting ready. I think he looked at his son. I think there were tears running down his face. Because this is what he loved more than anything else. But he loved God so much that he was willing to let go of what he thought was what God wanted, which was what God wanted, but it didn't make sense at that time. Does that make sense? There's some things right now going on in my life in the period of transition that doesn't really make sense, but I know it's the right thing, and I know that that's what God is doing. And so here he pulls out that, and I believe as he's got the knife in the air, I don't believe it's with a strong, secure hand, but I believe his hand is shaking a little bit. I believe he's looking at his son. He said, okay, God, I've gone as far as I can go. I've gone as far as I can go. The rest is up to you. And with a deep breath, he gets ready to release what he held most dear. And the angel of the Lord said, wait. The angel of the Lord is a theophany, which is the pre-incarnate Jesus. And the angel of the Lord says, wait. I've seen your obedience. That's all I wanted to see. I think Isaac must have said, whew, untie me quick. But you see, Abraham was so sure that even if he had to kill his son, that God would do something miraculous. Because he said, the boy and I will both be back. That's how much I trust God. That's how much I'm willing to put my life on the line. I'm going to tell you, it doesn't get any easier. I'm 66. God's still calling me into challenges I never thought I'd see before. But guess what? I know what God is saying in my heart, and I'm holding fast to the promise that He gave. All is well. God does something now that is so awesome. He's never done it before. He's made covenants with man. He's made promises with man. But God, for the first time, does something that's unbelievable. He looks at Abraham. He looks at what he's just done. And God says, I swear. That's what he said. He said, I swear. Look at this verse. I swear. God's sure word. Because you've gone through this and have not refused to give me your son, your dear son, I will bless you. Oh, I'll bless you. And I'll make sure that your children flourish like stars in the skies, like sand on the beaches, and your descendants will defeat their enemies, and all nations on the earth will find themselves blessed through your descendants because you obeyed me and started on this journey to a place called Yonder. What is that for you? What is God saying? I want you to believe your life matters. I want you to trust me. I want you to release what you've been holding on the dearest to. I want you to let that go because I've got something. I'm going to take your family and bless your family beyond. I'm going to take your business and not only let it affect you, but let it affect people around, give jobs and better jobs. Some of you that are retired, He's saying, I'm not through with you. I still have something so great for you. Your life matters. Would you bow your heads with me?